everyone, it's Alice, and today we are in front of my bookshelves, or some of my bookshelves, because I'm basically just gonna show you a bunch of books. So this isn't like a tag, but I have seen it around. I've seen other people do this, I didn't make this up, and I think it's a really fun video. The whole concept is basically like, I asked on Instagram for you to come up with prompts like show me a book that made you laugh, or show me a book that makes you think of a particular thing, whatever, and then I'm gonna show you those books today. If I can think of books for all the prompts, we'll see. This is also gonna be a challenge in do I know where my books are on my shelves, which is gonna be interesting. I think the answer is maybe sometimes. I do get questions every once in a while like, how do you organize your bookshelves? And the thing is, I don't really organize them. I just put things where they fit and I remember where they are. But I feel like lately I've moved a lot of stuff around and I've lost track a little bit of where things are. So it'll be interesting to see if I can find the books that I would like to show you today. We're just gonna get started though, and I'm gonna do as many of these as I can before the sun sets. It sets at like 3:30 here in Oslo right now, so it gets dark super early. So I'm just gonna start and we'll see how many we can get to. The first one says, show me a book that you went into not knowing much about it and ended up loving it. I can think of one book for this, and then I'm just gonna peruse my shelves to see if anything else pops out at me. I spent about 4 minutes looking for this book because I'd lost track of where I've put it, so clearly I don't know where everything is. By the way, I'm gonna leave these doors open. It may not be as aesthetically pleasing, but then I don't have to like open and close them throughout this whole video. I hope you can deal with it. The first book that I thought of for this prompt was Sometimes a River Song by Avril Joy. I am pretty sure that I was sent this by a publisher. I don't remember. It was years ago. And I didn't really know what this book was about before I read it, and it completely blew me away. I feel like this is a very underrated book, like no one ever talks about it. I've never heard anyone talk about this book, but it's amazing. The story is set in a riverboat community in Arkansas in the 1930s, and we meet a girl whose biggest dream is learning how to read, and we just follow her throughout the book. What's really cool about this is that it's written in dialect, which takes a little bit of time to get into, but once you get into it, like, just the whole feeling of this book is absolutely amazing, and it's a really heartwarming and also kind of heartbreaking story. The second book that I thought of was You Should Have Left by Daniel Kelman, which I'm pretty sure I just picked up on a whim in a bookstore. I think it was in Amsterdam, and it was like fall and I wanted something spooky, but this is also quite short, so I thought if I don't like it, it doesn't really matter because it's not going to take me ages to read. And I ended up really liking it. It's a horror novella about this man who is a writer who takes his family to this house in the mountains, and a lot of trippy stuff happens. It's quite spooky. The second one says, show me a book that has a pretty green cover, and I love this one because green is my favorite color, and I have a whole shelf over there that is just like green books, so I'm gonna show you some of those. It's hard to just pick a couple, so I'm gonna show you these. The first one is Kingdom Tide by Ry Curtis. I haven't read this one, and it has like a dark green cover, and I'm pretty sure I bought this in part because of the cover, because I like the little birds on it. I don't remember what this is about, but this kind of green is like my favorite type of green. The second one is The Glass House by Eve Chase. I love this cover. It's so beautiful. I love the leaves. I love the dark green. It goes all the way around. Absolutely beautiful. Haven't read it. Really want to. We also have this. I'm realizing a lot of these covers are like dark green, but that's because I love dark green. I haven't read this one either. I should. It sounds intriguing. I'm pretty sure this is YA. I don't know, but it says an ideal escape for fans of curses, magic, and mystery. That's probably why I got this, because that sounds perfect. The last one I have read, and the cover isn't entirely green, but it has a lot of green on it, especially on the back. And this is actually one of those books that I keep almost entirely because of the cover, but also in part because of where I got it. I actually picked this book up in New Zealand, and I have read it, and it didn't, like, I don't remember anything from it. It was just kind of a book that you read and it was fine. But I am obsessed with this cover, and I love that I got it in New Zealand, so I don't think I'm gonna get rid of it anytime soon because it's It's so beautiful. To mix it up a little bit, I will also show you this one. This is like light green. Obviously, this is a very beautiful cover. This whole series of books is beautiful, like these book covers. This is a poem for every spring day. Gorgeous, gorgeous cover. Has like foiling on it. Love it. We're gonna move on. I could show you loads of other green books, but we would be here all day. So we're gonna move on to the next one, which says, show me a book that was super weird and messed a little with your mind. My first thought goes to Bunny, which I do know where it is because I just saw it. It's right here. This one. This is easily like one of the weirdest books that I've read. It is kind of like well known on BookTube, I feel. I have heard a lot of people talk about this, but I don't know if it's just because those are the people that I watch. But this is a very weird book. It's a book about this student who's a part of this writers program, and in this program there are these girls who all call each other Bunny, and they're really weird and she kind of hates them, but then they invite her to an event and she goes, and it's a whole thing. There's a lot of weird stuff in this book, and it's the kind of book that is quite confusing and you might not entirely understand it, but I loved the vibes of it. Like, the vibes are immaculate. It's not a book that I would easily recommend. If you don't like weird books, it's not for you, and it will mess with you a little bit, mostly because it's a little bit vague and a little bit confusing, and you sort of have to interpret what you think is happening. The next one says, show me a book that brings you back to your childhood. Now, I don't remember a lot of the books that I read when I was a kid, but one stands out, and it's The Secret Garden, which I loved. I think I have a couple of editions of that, so I just need to find one. I have this beautiful edition of it, and I remember this is one of the first books that I read that I remember I read it in the school library, and I started reading it and I was so engrossed in it that I was just like, oh, this is what reading is. I get it. And it just totally sparked my interest in reading, and I love it. I have reread it as an adult, and I still think it's a very sweet and heartwarming book. It is like, there are some parts of it that are a little bit outdated, but the garden stuff and all of that is wonderful. Then someone says, show me a book that takes you on a journey in a historical time period. I am sure I could show you a bunch of books. I'm gonna take a look at my shelves and pick some out that I think are really good. Again, it's really hard to choose, so I'm just gonna show you these because these are the first 4 that I found. I'm sure I have loads of other recommendations, but you know, I can't show you everything. So the first book that I thought of was Sugar Money by Jane Harris. This is set, I think, in the 1800s, in 1765, and it's set on an island in the Caribbean, and it does involve like slave trade and stuff like that, and it's a story about 2 brothers. Really, really good, very immersive when it comes to the historical time period. This is like literary fiction, but if you want something with fantasy elements, I can recommend The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. This is set in the 12th century, I think, and it's about a female pirate who comes out of retirement because of this quest that she's given, and I loved this book. It's a great, great adventure, and I can't wait for the second book. I can't wait to reread this. Like, this is such a good book. I also thought of this, which I read this year. This is one of my favorite historical fiction books that I think I read this year. It's set in New York in 1899, and it's about this woman whose sister goes missing and they find her dead, and all of the blood has been drained from her body, and there might be a vampire, maybe not. She's also addicted to drugs. There's a lot of stuff going on, but the historical time period in this, like the way that it's written, is great. The last one, because I don't want to entirely neglect nonfiction books. I haven't read a lot of nonfiction books this year, but generally in my reading I do read quite a lot of them. This is one of my favorite books ever, and it definitely takes you on a journey in a historical time period. This is Over the Edge of the World, and it tells the story, the real story of the first circumnavigation of the globe. This is a fantastic book. I've read it several times, and it's just so cool and interesting. I do think maybe you need like an interest in this for it to be cool, but I'm a nerd and I love history, so I thought it was cool. The next one I have thought about since I first read it, and I don't really have anything for you. It says, show me a book that someone dies on the first page. I am sure that I have read several books where a person dies on the first page, but my memory is terrible. I love it when people are like, I tell someone about a book and I recommend it, I'm like, you're gonna love it. And they're like, okay, tell me more details. I don't have any details. I don't remember. But I do know of one book where you're told on the first page that someone has died, but they don't actually like die in the book until the middle of the book because you sort of go back. Whatever. I'm gonna show you the book. It's The Secret History. The only reason I remember this is that, one, I've read this book several times and so I do remember just in general, but I am also currently rereading this book, and we're told on the first page that Bunny, the character in this, is dead. Bunny has been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of her situation. That's the only one I can think of. I'm sure I've read others, but I don't remember them. The next one is also kind of challenging. It says, show me a book that made you laugh hysterically. The thing is, when I read, I very rarely like laugh out loud or cry or feel any sort of outward emotion. It's all in here. It just stays in here. So I don't know if a book has ever made me laugh hysterically, but I can think of a couple books that I thought were funny, so I'll show you those. They're both actually by the same author, and they're both about death, which, why that's so funny? If you get it, you get it. If you don't, it's okay. But I loved both of these books. They're quite funny, both of them. They're both by Caitlin Doughty. This is From Here to Eternity, and this is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? And I think there's something about the writing that makes me, like, made these books funny. They are very respectful. Like, it's obviously a topic where you need to be very respectful, but there's also a lot of absurdity around death, and I think that Caitlin Doughty has a great way of writing about it. And a lot of the stuff in here is super funny because it's just really bizarre. Then someone says, show me a book that has a sentient house. I've never read a book where a house actually has a voice, but I have read some books where the house is kind of like alive in a way. So I can think of two. The first one I've already shown you, it's this one. I don't know if the house is sentient, but there is something about the house. I don't want to give it away, but there is something about the house in this. But this one, I actually read this fall. This is Ravenfall. This has an inn that is very much like it has its own personality. You don't hear from the perspective of the inn, but it like moves around and it moves walls and furniture and it can sort of push you in the right direction. So it's kind of like sentient, and it's actually one of my favorite characters from this book was the inn. The next one says, show me a book that caused a major reading slump. I don't think that I have any of those books anymore. I don't keep most of them, but I have read some classics where I at least had to take a little bit of a break after reading it because it was a lot. I have somehow managed to read War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. The main issue with this is this. It's the length and how big it is, and it's such a tome and the font is tiny. I spent 6 weeks reading this book, which is actually pretty good now that I think of it, but I really when I started reading it, I was like, I can't read anything else because I will never finish this book, and I just wanted to read it to be able to say I've read War and Peace, which no one has ever asked me about and no one cares, but it was very important to me at the time. I read this, and after it I had to take I think I read a little bit, but I felt like it really put me in a little bit of a slump because it was just kind of overwhelming. I do think it is like a good book, but it is 1,400 pages, so I would never recommend this to anyone because I feel like a lot of it, maybe controversially, is unnecessary. There are some parts of this that are really uninteresting. And I have read Anna Karenina, which is like 900 pages, and it didn't make me feel the same way at all. Like, I loved that book, and it could have been this big and I would have loved it, but yeah, this was a lot. Then this one really made me chuckle. It says, show me a book that you are postponing to read but definitely should read ASAP. Rebecca. Cough cough. I'm gonna show you Rebecca because that really is one of those books. This is my edition of Rebecca. I have had this for maybe 6 or 7 years. I think I've mentioned it several times a year in TBRs every year that I've had this channel, and I still haven't read it. And it's one of those books that I feel like I should read when it's fall. So every time fall comes around, I'm like, I need to read Rebecca. Well, fall has come and passed this year as well, and I did not read it. So I think I'm gonna have to let go of thinking I'm gonna read this in fall and just read it. I mean, I should read it now, but I don't feel like it, so I'm gonna put it off a little bit more. I also recently showed this in a TBR. This is one of those books that I've had for ages. Really, really need to read, and I just haven't. I guess also Piranesi is one of those books. Some of these books, I never seem to get to them. But I always regret it when I do, because when I do, I love them. The next one I also really like. It says, show me a book that made you feel like you traveled physically to this place. Real place in the world and not real. I can think of a couple for real place in the world, but I'm gonna take a look at some of my fantasy books that I've read that have sort of transported me. Alright, so my main one for feeling transported into a setting is this one. This is Force of Nature by Jane Harper. This is the second book in a crime thriller series, and it's set in Australia. And the thing about this is that I think where I was affected how I felt about this book, but I also do think that Jane Harper writes atmosphere like nobody else. I read this when I was in New Zealand, and I read this book, and I was like in a forest for part of reading this book, and it actually kind of freaked me out because it was a little bit scary. But I think the setting in this, it's like set out in the bush, is absolutely amazing. I could mention a bunch of other ones, but I'm gonna stick to this one. And then for being transported into a place that is not real, I think The Name of the Wind. This is a book that I don't really talk about that much because I read this when I was, I don't know, like 18, 19, which is many, many years ago now. But I loved this book. I think the setting of it is fantastic. I haven't reread it since then, but I do remember feeling very transported when I read it. I'm also still waiting for the third book, and now I feel like we're never gonna get it, but maybe one day. The next one says, show me a book that has a great cover, spine, has a great story, and that you definitely want to reread. I know exactly what to show you. It's a book that I was gonna reread this fall, but I didn't. It's over here. I have this beautiful edition of Frankenstein. I have several beautiful editions of Frankenstein, but this is absolutely gorgeous. I got this for myself for my birthday because it's one of my favorite books and I just love it. It has a beautiful, beautiful cover. The spine is matching. I really like it. The back is beautiful. It's also like, it has texture to it, so some of this is indented. Is that what you say? I don't know, but it feels great as well. It has a great story. I think Frankenstein is one of the greatest stories ever. It's one of my favorite books, and I definitely want to reread it. But again, this is one of those fall books for me, and there is never enough time in fall to read as I need, because I have so many books that I want to read when it's fall. But this is also a book that I would definitely reread at other points during like the year. Maybe winter is actually a great time to reread this. Then someone writes, show me a book that you wanted to read so badly for years, but believe you'll never actually read. You've outgrown it. I think that I have gotten rid of a lot of these books, but I can't think of an author that I thought I would be more into, and now I'm wondering if I don't actually want to read any more of that author's work, which is maybe a little bit, I don't know. I can't tell. I can't tell if it was just a book that I read or if I just didn't like it, but I'll show you the other books that I have by this author. It's actually these books by the author Vladimir Nabokov. I read Lolita. Was it this year? This year or last year, and I absolutely hated it. I really disliked that book. The more I think about it, the more I dislike it. I think I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, but I really should have given it 1 star because it really, really didn't like it. And I have these other books by him, which are beautiful, by the way. I love these editions, and I can't tell if I want to read anything else by him. I don't know if Lolita is very different from his other works, but I have Pale Fire and Collected Poems. Maybe I'll give the poems a go, but I'm also just wondering if I just let these books go and just be done with it. Then you're gonna get a little bit of a sneak peek into my next book haul. It says, show me a book that is the most recent one that you bought. I actually got a package with some books today, so I will show you those. I got these 2 books. I got the next book in the Thursday Murder Club series. Of course, this has been out for a little while, but I wanted to wait until the paperback was out so it matches my other editions, which are over there. I do know where those are. So I got that, and then I also had to get What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. I have had maybe like 6 people tell me about this book, and I'm so grateful and I'm so happy because I keep saying that I want books that are like adventure and maybe a little bit mysterious, and a lot of people have told me that this is kind of like The Mummy, the movie, which is something that I've mentioned a lot, and I'm so happy that so many of you thought of me when you heard about this book and you actually took time to like DM me or comment on a video about this book. So I got it, and hopefully I'm gonna love it. I feel like it's gonna be great. The next one says, show me a book that you have the most copies of. I think this is gonna be one of 2 books, so I will gather my copies and we'll see which one I have the most of. Before I show you these, I am aware that this is completely unnecessary. It is unnecessary to have more than one copy of a book, but these are some of my favorite books and I'm sort of collecting editions. I have 3 editions of The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and then I have 4 editions of Frankenstein. So Frankenstein wins, but I'm gonna show you all of them just because I want to. So I have this basic edition of The Secret History, which is the one that I'm currently rereading. I'm actually annotating this book as well, and because I have several copies of this book, I don't feel as bad about it. So this is the one that I have read. I actually haven't read any of the other ones, but I have this white edition. This is, I think, the 25th anniversary edition. This is paperback, beautiful. I don't think I'm ever gonna read this because it's white and I think I would ruin it. And then I think last year I got this. This is just a hardcover edition of the book. It's the 30th anniversary edition, and I'm sure when I die I will have all the anniversary editions that I can get of this book because I love it and I think all of these books are beautiful. I do wish that The Secret History had some other like more creative book editions out that I could get, but I think it's just the hoarder and the collector in me that just wants it. For Frankenstein, I have this edition that I just showed you. Then I have this, I don't remember what these are called, but I'm pretty sure they're out of print now, but this is beautiful. I have this is by Oxford Classics, I think. It has like a brain on the cover, really cool. And then I have the Penguin English Library edition. Don't need all of these editions either, but here we are. Then someone writes, show me a book that is unpopular, but you actually love it. I don't know if I would say that I love it, but I can think of at least one book for this. So this is Book of Night by Holly Black. And the thing is, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, and when I read it, I was like, this is objectively like not great. There isn't a lot of character building, there isn't a lot of world building, a lot of stuff in this book doesn't make sense, but I actually did like it quite a lot and I really, really enjoyed it. I do think I was in one of those moods where I was just like, anything goes and everything is fine, like it doesn't really matter, but I know a lot of people really, really dislike this book, and I don't know, I kind of liked it. I wouldn't say that I loved it, but I did enjoy it. The next one says, show me a book that warms your heart. I know of the two books that I want to show you for this. One is over there, the other one I don't know where it is, so I'm gonna look for it. I think one of the main things that really warms my heart when it comes to books is books about friendship and unlikely friendship. So I have two of those. Of course, I have to mention Sweet Bean Paste by Dorian Sukagawa. This is a beautiful book set in Japan about an elderly woman and this lost man and the student who all come together, and it's beautiful. And then I have Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce, which is set in the 1950s, and two women, two unlikely friends, go on this adventure. It's beautiful, heartbreaking, heartwarming, but whenever I think of both of these books, I get this like warm, fuzzy feeling inside. Okay, we're gonna do this last one because the sun is setting and I'm losing light, so the last one I'm gonna do is show me a book that you think about the most in your life, and it can't be The Secret History. This is a great question because I think about The Secret History all the time. But I'll take a look at my shelves and I will find a couple that I think about a lot. So I could obviously show you my entire favorites shelf, but I'm gonna show you these three books because I think these are the ones that I most actively think about often. The first one is actually a poetry collection. It's Undying by Michelle Faber, which is beautiful and heartbreaking, and there is this one poem in here that has just really stuck with me, and I think about it almost on a weekly basis. I think about it a lot. Funnily enough, it's actually like this quote on the back is like my favorite quote from that poem. It says, "All I can do in what remains of my brief time is mention to whoever cares to listen that a woman once existed who was kind and beautiful and brave, and I will not forget how the world was altered beyond recognition when we met." It is, like, it almost makes me cry just reading it. The second book that I think about a lot is Strange Weather in Tokyo, actually. I really want to reread this book because I think I read it first like 5-6 years ago and I haven't reread it since, but I think about some of the scenes in this book a lot, and a lot of the food that they eat in here. I don't know if it's just because I'm food driven that I remember this so much, but this is like a weird and beautiful story. Again, it's kind of about unlikely friendship, so I think about this a lot. And then we have 1984 by George Orwell. This book, like when I read this book, it blew me away because when I read it, I suddenly understood a lot of things that I didn't understand before. And there are a lot of stuff in this book that I think about in my everyday life when I come across certain things. And like when I read certain types of news and we talk about stuff and stuff at work. And I just think about this book a lot, and I think it's a great book. I do think it is a little bit difficult to read sometimes. I understand that it's not for everyone, but I think that what this teaches you is monumental. Like, it's so good. That is all we have time for today, though. I did actually get quite a lot more of these, so if you like this and you want a part 2, let me know and I will make one. I really enjoyed doing this. I think this is a great way of like showing you books that I don't necessarily talk about that often, or I get to talk about like specific books, and it's kind of fun to film. It is a challenge to find the books though. I did better than I thought I was going to, but I don't know if it's just because I've forgotten a lot of books that I maybe should have mentioned. I don't know, but I had fun. I hope you enjoyed it as well. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!